Welcome to the Pursuit of Wellbeing. My name's Maria Brosnan. I'm the founder of Pursuit and your host for the show. We're dedicated to providing wellbeing information, inspiration and support for teachers, leaders and school staff around the world. My guest today is Patrick Ottley-O'Connor. Patrick is the head teacher at West Horton High School in Bolton. He's been a teacher for over 34 years, including 27 years as a senior leader and 17 years as a head principal or executive principal in secondary, primary and special schools. Patrick coaches many aspiring, new and experienced head teachers and CEOs, particularly those facing significant challenges both in the UK and internationally. He leads and facilitates a variety of leadership programs, ranging from middle to executive leadership courses. He is a Department for Education coach for Women Leading in Education initiative. Patrick is also a trustee of the Wardle Trust and founding director of Collaborative Leadership Limited. He's married to Mel with 5 sons and living the teacher 5-a-day dream as a wellbeing supermodel. Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Well, big introduction there.
Well, it's an impressive career, and a lot of what you've done really focuses around leadership, and that's what I'd like to focus our conversation around today. You're welcome to jump in wherever you like, but we've got a number of questions from Twitter, which I'll get to. But talk me through a day in your life, even. What's it like as a leader in these current times?
I don't know how many heads will admit to this, but actually, I'm quite happy being a head teacher during the pandemic. I've worked in a series of challenging circumstances in different schools and different contexts. The pandemic is a new dimension to that. It's just another barrier that gets presented to us, and it's. I feel I've got some skills that can help us deal and make a difference, as we should be doing for the children and for the staff that are in our care within schools. So I'm enjoying, as you said, living the dream at the moment, enjoying my time. Only a few years to retirement, and I suppose at this stage of my career, enjoying my craft as much as, if not more so, than ever before, really.
Mm. And why would you say other heads might not feel the same way or admit to that?
Well, it's not about me. It's tough. Headship is tough. Yeah. I'm not saying I don't find it tough. I just enjoy that challenge. But when you're thinking of schools that are facing, let's just go back 10 months, for example. Beginning of the year, people have budget restraints. There was a teacher recruitment and leadership recruitment issue, crisis, if you like. We've got some fairly quick turnovers of change. Change is rapid within education anyway. So there's a lot of things there that add to the bubble. We have in some of our schools, sadly, we've seem to have created a culture of toxicity around accountability. Accountability is good, but actually it can become toxic in some organisations, in some areas. And I'm not picking out their multi-academy trusts or local authorities or anything. I think within education, within leadership, within schools, or the people that lead the schools, those things can occur. And I support sort of many head teachers and senior staff, and in fact other staff as well at the moment, that find themselves in a situation where they're not happy doing the role they're doing. And for many heads, they're either jumping, falling, or being pushed off a cliff, and that's how it feels. So I know there are heads out there that aren't. There are many other heads who I'm sure are enjoying and living the dream as I am. But I do know there are people out there who struggle at the moment. Yeah.
Well, can I pick up something that you just mentioned about the toxicity around accountability? What do you mean by that?
Okay. There's a really good mantra of an organisation I like, actually, through the Ambitions Institute, who used to be Ambition School Leadership, and a programme there called the Future Leaders Programme. And there was a mantra from them around, we must have high expectations with no excuses and no exceptions. It's a great mantra to have. And I take them away from that organisation now, and other people that may use that as a philosophy, as a way to go forward. We have high expectations of everybody in our community, of the staff and of the students, to get the highest possible grades, and no exception to that. No excuses made. We should do that. Now, for some people, that's become a fairly macho approach to leadership in terms of a big stick to beat. We can't. And for me, my leadership style, I use what I'll call an antidote to that approach, and that is, that works really well if at the same time as we have the high expectations, no excuses, no exceptions approach to standards, that we also are exactly the same to the mental health and well-being of staff and students. So high expectations that we all look after ourselves, we all look after each other, so we can all make a big difference to the children together. No exceptions to that, that people can't opt out of looking after their mental health and well-being as a member of staff, and that we support and ensure, we encourage, we engage, we empower people to be able to own their own mental health and well-being as well. And actually, there's no excuses made that we haven't got the time or we haven't got those things. We need to look at our structures and systems within schools to ensure our workforce are the best possible shape to be able to make a difference. So I suppose it's as long as we've got the antidote, then we get rid of the toxicity. It's not as simple as that, but really for me, that's what it tends to come down to.
And what kind of strategies do you use then, or how do you actually do that in your school? And I know that you've been a CEO of a multi-academy trust, so across a number of schools. So do you have an overarching theme or an overarching strategy that helps you do that?
Yeah, I've not been a CEO, I've been an executive leader in those trusts to be able to do it. So working at that senior level, but not in the top job. That's not a job I've wanted to play with.
Okay.
I did 9 years in my own schools as substantive head teacher, but then for the past 8 years or so, I've gone into schools that have been in, or group schools that have been in challenging circumstances or facing leadership instability, or it could be they're in special measures, etc. And that's either been in a school, like I'm in West Horton at the moment, where a head teacher went and we needed a new head teacher to take over as an interim until we can appoint a new head, and that's part of that role, or a school, as I've been to. I worked previously in schools where I took on 3 schools that were in special measures, appointed new heads and lifted and moved forwards. But the fundamental thing in those at the start is how we get everybody really to understand why we're doing what we're doing. Simon Sinek talks about the why, the how and the what, and I use those quite strongly. So today's day 26 in my new role at West Horton, and all the staff on day 1, when I met them all for the first time in little bubbles as we went around to go and do it, we all pointed quite literally and physically in the same direction. So we knew our values-based vision of the school. We then unpicked that so we know what it meant to us individually, but also to us collectively. And we all decided that was what we were doing. So we all pointed in that direction. And for me then to keep people pointing in that direction for everything we do, to be able to link it into our values-based vision as we go forwards, and to encourage colleagues to do the same. So that's been the starting point of doing that. And then actually how we operate and how we bring that to life and the way that we work. So the use of a talent management process that we put in place around our appraisal. Appraisal's been flipped from being very much a data-driven target to a developmental focus, underpinned by the aspirations and the standards that we want and the targets for people there, but around development and to grow the talent within the organisation through an emerging culture of coaching to work alongside colleagues, so people get, rather than being pushed and pulled, get sucked along in the process in how we're doing things to deliver on the why. And actually what we do then will fall out and we'll agree together as we go forwards. For me, that's a great way to start to build culture and create a culture of mental health and well-being, or create a culture of development through coaching, or whatever we're trying to do. It's the whole thing here around leadership is around creating something that's sustainable of a culture and not just quick fixes.
That's a key word, isn't it? Making sustainable changes. And I completely agree with you in terms of the values-based vision for your school, because then that's something, it's unarguable then. And I'm sure that cuts through a lot of the difficulties that schools have. I've been in so many schools doing leadership training. I work with senior leadership teams, and there's such a culture of us and them. And I'll give you an example, and I'd love your thoughts on this. I was working in a school just before lockdown, and I was physically in the school, and the team was so frustrated with the teachers because the teachers had decided, and I don't know many of the details about how they came to this conclusion, but that they were not going to work beyond 5 o'clock, and they were going to manage their well-being and kind of manage their workload. And the senior leadership team felt that they had to pick up a lot of the work that the teachers had kind of refused to do in many ways. And there was this awful kind of push-pull, this very toxic kind of feeling in that school, very much us and them. And in an opposite example of that, I was with a school online recently, and the teachers felt that the senior leadership team were doing too much for their well-being, and they were forcing them to take care of their well-being. And so this strange, I've been in so many schools where there's this strange kind of us and them culture. And I'd really love your thoughts on that. And I think your answer about the values-led vision comes a long way to that. But any other thoughts around how do we break down that divide of us and them?
Yeah, well, first of all, for me, the leadership boils down to two things. One, establishing expectations with the team, and secondly, establishing relationships. So expectations and relationships. And once we've established, so expectations, the questions I asked on that day one again were, what are you expecting from me as the head teacher for this year that we've got together? Because I'll be appointed a new head teacher for the school moving forwards. So what are your expectations of me? What are your expectations of each other? And these are my expectations of us. Mm-hmm. So the expectations were set really quite clearly. Mm-hmm. The relationships in conversations. So before I actually walked into the building on September, the whatever day we came this year when we started, 26 days ago, I'd already met all SLT online like this, one-to-one, and a one-to-one to find out their role, their hopes, their aspirations, their fears, what they want to be when they grow up. Mm. You know, whatever. There's a specific question I asked them around where they were going and so on. Mm. So I had an understanding and some clarity of roles, clarity of those things, so we're pointing in the right direction. Mm. And it's actually, in terms of building relationships, that's key, but also understanding not what I think staff want, and so we understand each other. On that day one as well, a staff perception questionnaire. I asked the staff the 23 Ofsted style questions. Is this a good school? Do you feel safe? Etc., etc. Those sort of questions. But also some West Horton specific ones here, and questions in there around their mental health and well-being. One word to describe how you're feeling right now after we've done our presentation. How would you describe your workload at the moment? Those sort of questions. And within that staff perception questionnaire, at the time, people were quite hopeful and shared with me what they thought, but they also shared the concerns around behaviour was an issue, around consistency was an issue. And I was able to tend to repeat back to people, you tell me as a group overwhelmingly that we're proud to be part of Team West Horton, but you're not happy with the way behaviour is being managed right now. And I tell people back what we say. Of course, you're going to have outliers, and it's important they're acknowledged. But I speak to the colleagues about, you've said, so we've done all we're doing. So they understand where I am. And actually, for most of those, I've got to be fairly foolish not to listen to what I'm told or go along in what I'm being told. But there are also some non-negotiables around what's acceptable or not acceptable as we move forward in terms of changing. And sometimes people can't see the future. So I have to say on this one, I've listened to what you've got to say, but we're going to do it this way anyway. Or particularly if I've got a 50% saying that, 50% saying that, that's Solomon's baby type activity, make a decision and choice on what we do. And so I think that the tough decisions, that's what I'm paid to do. But I'm also, by listening to what colleagues say, I've done that review on day one. I told the staff that, again, the first 100 days of headship and leadership is another thing I train other head teachers on. So I live the dream of that as well. I'm now, as I know, on day 26, and that's written on my board, and staff know that as we go forward, that we're going to ask the question on day 41. And why day 41? Because we've picked the start of the second week of November, after half term, after the clocks have gone back, when it's dark and it's miserable, after bonfire night, when kids have got high. That week, staff determined was going to be the worst week in the school in this term. So we're going to ask people how they're feeling, how they're doing, how is it on that day. I know what I'm hoping they're going to say is behaviour is bad, but it's never been as good at this time of year. You know, because actually behaviour goes in cycles and where we are. And hopefully they'll be saying actually behaviour is on the improvement. We're doing. Because let you into a secret, COVID has had some positives in that we've introduced some one-way systems, we've rebooted everything we're doing, and the place is a nice, calm place at the moment. Year 7, 8, and 9, really well nailed, and a lovely climate for learning. Year 11, are now onto it a bit earlier than they normally would be, because they've been panicked by what happened previously, really. So we've got them. Year 10 is my bogey year at the moment, and we work, as every school will have, we're working really hard and killing them with love and kindness and support. And we've upped our counselling offer within those year groups. We've invested heavily in the student mental health and wellbeing and things we do as well, around working with those students, but listening to what the staff say. And then again, we'll do the process again. It just so happens day 100 falls just after Blue Monday, which is the other time that we associate. People have dropped the New Year's resolutions and so on and so forth. And we'll ask colleagues again, how's it going at that point? Yeah. So involving staff in a dialogue, but also for me then to be able to meet individually with colleagues and speak to them, or groups of teams, as we go along. Well, if you forgive me, I'll just go off on this little particular piece, because a very specific thing around the mental health and wellbeing and feeling connected. We didn't use pre-lockdown and during lockdown. We didn't use Teams before I took over particularly well in terms of connecting staff. We started to use it with students because it had not been used before, but we now have every Monday. This morning we've done it, our business meeting, which is we've got some CATS tests being done, and we've got, we're going to have another fire drill later on this week, so I don't tell them when, but we'll be having a drill. That sort of information we tell people as we go forward. Wednesday is our celebratory meeting. It's our mental health and wellbeing Star of the Week briefing. It's where people share good practice and things that are occurring, so we keep connected. And that's a real positive effect already. Staff nominate. We do a nomination for a shout out for staff, where any member of staff can give a shout out for another colleague who's made a positive difference to their mental health and well-being. It could be something as simple as bringing them a cup of coffee when they've come in from a cold, wet break time, or it could be something, as I had in a previous school, where a member of staff whose mum died quite suddenly took 9 days out because she was organising the funeral and everything else, and when she came back in, the entire department had taken a set of books each, marked them, sorted them, and because she had supply in, so she came back to a completely clean sheet, and they got a nomination. It's just lovely that we get staff doing these random acts and really quite systematic acts of kindness as well put in place. And we introduced this early on in the term, and there were 20, 30. We're now up to, I think last week there were 66 nominations for our Star of the Week, and one of our technicians won it this week, and she was so proud to have her photograph taken with it. Just a simple tub of chocolates that then, got shared. She wanted that shared on Twitter as well, so she could be seen by people out there. So those sort of things help create that, the culture. But what we've seen is, because we're now in a series of bubbles, we teach in year group bubbles at the moment, that if, say, for example, I have 10 math teachers, there's 2 of those in each bubble. So they're not coming together as a team of 10 physically. They're in their own bubble with their new colleagues in a new bubble. And we're having to work really quite hard at developing relationships within the bubble they're in now, to be able to support each other. So we've introduced, again, an idea that came from staff, a wonderful, she's a progress leader for year 8, a woman called Cara, and she'd had this idea that she'd done last year briefly, called Buddies, a secret buddy scheme, where a bit like you do Secret Santa, but do it through the year and done it with a few people. Well, this year we've really gone for that, and we set up our Bubble Buddies. And our Bubble Buddies are, within that group, people opt to do little, like a Secret Santa, but without spending money. We put a real limit of about £20 for the full year on it. We're not doing that. It's around doing those nice things for people, and to keep them in your thoughts, and to keep your eye out for them, and shout out if you think they're struggling or otherwise. And alongside that, then, for the champions, we've got our first meeting tonight of our Bubble Buddy Bosses. And our Bubble Buddy Bosses are the group of champions within each bubble who are going to keep things going. So they're already talking about plans for when you do like Christmas jumper day, each house I'm talking like a house system, each bubble now will, whichever group gets the best, staff get the best jumpers, and we share that online or whatever else on the day, will there be some sort of prize? And we're talking about having Bubble Buddies Bacon Butty Fridays, I think, is the next thing they've talked about, just so we can come together, and groups of them that have done well, getting them together to listen and speak about what the challenge that we're having, and for people to be open about those challenges. Now, this is when you talked about everybody having to engage, and it's a non-negotiable for me. I expect people to turn up to their lessons and plan their lessons. I expect people to turn up for their duty on time. I expect people to look after themselves. It's the same level of expectation. No excuses, no exceptions. That's where it is. And in fact, on day 1, the first slide I shared to everybody before I said anything else was a picture of Mel, our 5 boys and me, a nice cheesy photograph, but with a phrase that above it that said, look after yourself first before helping others so we can make the biggest difference for our learners. And it's about making sure you permanently got your oxygen mask at the ready, if not on, and doing that at good times when we're not feeling stressed, so you're well drilled. So when we do need it, you recognise the signs, you can step away and do those. I've got a wonderful team that have engaged with what we're doing here, and it's I couldn't have wished for a better start here in terms of the engagement that's had with people in terms of what we do, because teaching is tough. Working, supporting in the classroom is tough. Working in the office, supporting is tough. And all those things are tough. But actually, if we're in it together, that we're all looking after ourselves and each other, then it becomes a much more enjoyable experience and a little less tough.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you've just given a whole lot of gold there, Patrick, because it can feel so lonely. Across, if you're a teacher, especially when you're feeling more isolated, which actually leads nicely to a question from Twitter, from Katrina, who is at Miss K Cricket. And she said, times are different now. We have a large staff. How to ensure that wellbeing doesn't fall between the cracks, which you've just outlined beautifully. But what about staff who are new to the school with social distancing and restrictions? How do we welcome them and make them feel part of the team? I think you've just answered that.
Well, yes, but I can answer. I've just given you the broad brushstrokes, the skeleton, if you like. I talk new staff in particular. Yeah. Induction for anybody is really, really key. And in fact, I'm the new boy. I need induction. Yeah, and I wasn't included originally on the list that came out. And I said, well, what about me? I will join. So I join in to learn as well as we go forwards. And we have the regular induction program that we would do, but then we've now done that with bells on in terms of what we do in induction. And we've put in place now that if anybody joins the school, then they get that. If anybody in school gets an internal promotion, they get a new induction that kicks in then for the following 4 to 6 weeks with a mentor. Because let's just say, for example, you were the second in maths and you're really good at your job and you're wonderful and a great teacher and inspiring people at that level. You then get the job of head of maths. You don't know what you're doing. You're new head, you've not done it before. Exactly. Suddenly, your capability is threatened. And in fact, having clear lines is the Hayes model of leadership, where you're at the intersection of accountability, authority, and capability. There's a sweet spot in the middle when they're working well, that you're doing well. And actually, your accountability and authority in those roles might be clear, but your capability, because you're not sure what you're doing, is threatened. Well, it's not good enough to go, well, you'll be all right, or we're very busy, let's leave it. We put something in place to make sure that we don't even allow people to dip. And that's not as a big crack the whip so you don't dip. It's so you can just get yourself back where, and it's okay to ask those stupid questions that you don't know what that acronym means, or you don't know where that, or actually what is that report I'm supposed to be doing, or saying I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Can somebody help me unpick this? And for people to have a coach, but also a mentor in that role, as that we take those things up, is really important. So I've talked about the staff perception questionnaires. I don't questionnaire people to death. I've got those 3 I've got, just to be clear on that. But the new staff, last week were given a perception questionnaire as new members of staff. You've done day 25. Well, actually, we did it on day 21, which was last Monday days. It was our 21st, so we had a 21st kiss. And a 21st kiss is not what you might be thinking. It's socially distanced.
I do want to know.
Okay. So on our 21st, they were asked the questions. And the questions are, we've started you here with what we're doing. Anything in your practice you set off that you're going to keep? Okay. What are we going to improve? Or what could we improve in the support we give you? What do you need to stop doing now? Or what do we need to stop doing now? And what are you going to start doing now? Or what do we need to start doing to make sure that that induction carries on? That was our 21st kiss. And actually, that deadline is just closed. I remind people on the briefing this morning, and the follow-up conversation as a group, they're coming together as a virtual group to talk about those issues with one of my deputies. I can't remember the date, but one later on this week, they're having a get-together to be able to talk about those things and actually to be able to unpick collectively and share some celebrations together of what's going well, but share some issues they may collectively be having, for people to be open and honest about those things and be able to move forwards. And actually, when I say open and honest, Patrick Lencioni talks about the 5 dysfunctions or functions of a team. And actually, the basis of any team is around trust. And you get trust, the next phase is you've got to have healthy conflict. and you've got to be able to share the issues. So actually that level of feedback that we may avoid, or those difficult conversations, we speak about and we're openly talking. Now, again, we're not asking everyone to just talk openly in a public forum, but then an individual follow-up on those questions or on those things as well with mentors to be able to unpick and move forwards. And by doing that, you get commitment, you get buy-in, you get that real focus and attention on the outcomes for learners.
Mm-hmm. And the impact across the whole school then is, well, literally, it's measurable, it's palpable, because with a healthy culture, you can do anything.
Yeah.
Can't you?
Now, don't believe me, I'm not believing my own hype with all these things I'm saying to you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's really important we understand the issues and where those issues are, and the feedback is if the criticisms we've got to take on board. In fact, when I was in North Liverpool, we did a staff perception questionnaire there, and I was the executive head, and there was the acting principal, a woman called Emily Vernon, who's now the principal. She's great, she's stunning, does some really good work. And I talked to her in some coaching around feedback is a gift. And I kept saying that feedback is a gift, and when people give it, you listen. Don't just listen, but hear, and really hear, particularly if it's difficult feedback. And we did that staff. She'd been the deputy in the school, and we asked the questions, and it was, there's some real positive in there, but there was some real hard-hitting things that she needed to address herself as the acting head, having been the deputy there. And the way she said it in the staff briefing was just lovely, and you could see light bulbs go on for people and win some of those people around that may have been critical, in that she said, Patrick keeps saying that feedback's a gift. I must admit at the moment I'm finding a couple of those presents hard to receive, but I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to do this, and I want to make sure that my door is open to people. And she really opened up and talked about those things. And one of the things I'm really big on is reclaiming this word support plan. That has become a mega issue. So again, on day one, again, tongue in cheek, and the deputies knew I was doing this, but I said to staff that support for colleagues and talent development is really important. In fact, I've got 2 members of staff already on a support plan, and I'm going to name them now. And you could see people do it. And I named the 2 deputies, Claire and Caroline, who get a lot of great feedback, and I got a lot of great feedback. And I said, support plan, yeah, they're really good deputies. They want to become great deputies, and they want to go on towards headship. So they've both now got their own high-performing head teacher coach to work alongside them, independent to me. We'd set that up. They're both starting their MPQH. They'll have mentoring from me in the role as they go forward this year, and their support there so they can go from being good to great. And then I did you didn't think I meant because they were underperforming, did you? Type. And actually, it doesn't matter if they are, because part of this, what you'll see is there's no point, we do work on the things that are good to get them to great, but there's no point doing that and ignoring the bits we shouldn't do. So my business manager, another great leader, a woman called Anne Butler, when we were doing, there'd been no performance management in place for support staff previously. We've now put that in place, and they're lapping up and really enjoying that. But when we did the training with their staff, as we were going through, and I said, when you're picking your targets, by all means pick something that you're doing well to do it better. But also, why don't we pick something as part of your game that's maybe not going as well, because then we can improve and grow on that as well. And she outed herself at the meeting to say, I should be saying what Patrick's saying, but I've had a real issue with speaking publicly. And from now on, my commitment, part of my target, is to do that more often. And already around that, she's done some middle leadership training with our support staff middle leaders, which had not been in place before. She did it, she planned it, I rehearsed it with her, she did it, got it ready, she's gone off and done, and straight away addressing that and lifted herself and the lift that's given to other colleagues. And it's about freeing people from those bureaucratic tasks and liberating people to do their role. And a great enjoyment from doing that. But we've focused massively on the why and the how as we go forward, and the what's to make sure we can be functional during COVID, and that's going pretty well. We're all making that up at the time, and that's gone particularly well for us. We've carried on reviewing it. But it is the long haul. It's all right sat here on day 26 saying that. I've got to be saying this on day 100. I've got to be saying this at the end of the year. So actually keeping that level of focus between ourselves as a team, and particularly at those tougher times, keeping that going.
You've mentioned, Patrick, a number of times. You've referred to the 100 days, the first 100 days, and the various points throughout that. Why is that so important to you? Is that to keep you focused? What's the importance of the first 100 days?
Well, it helps me keep focused. It helps me. I'm a massive fan of Teacher 5 a Day. In fact, I base my life around Teacher 5 a Day now, to be honest. It's 365 days a year for me. My leadership style, the things I do. When I talked about isolation, being connected is one of the big 5 within there.
Will you tell people what are, for people who might not know, what is Teacher 5 a Day? Yeah.
Well, Teacher 5 a Day was born out of the NHS big piece of research quite a few years ago now into the 5 ways to wellbeing. And Martin Rea, sorry, he's the godfather of it, really, that came up with this and shared it through his Pedigree Hampshire that he ran. And the 5 ways of really the 5 hashtags you'll see if you see it on Twitter alongside that things are we should be connected. And by connecting with other people and keeping connected, it supports our own mental health and well-being. Being isolated, the opposite of that, we know can lead to issues. So being connected, taking regular exercise. Again, you don't have to be a super athlete, but getting out and doing those increasing steps or whatever it is you do and doing those things around it. Noticing the world around us and taking time to do that. And every year, whenever I notice the trees, the leaves just turning, and they're going to fall very shortly, I'll put a tweet out saying, if you've not looked up at the sky for a while, look up and see the colours, because you're going to miss it. And the number of leaders that have missed those nativity plays or missed those rites of passage with the children because they've been too busy. I can't because of. I'm building them into your life. So there's that aspect of it. Learning new things, and always learning keeps our mind active as well. And a big one for me, which really supports my own well-being, is that around volunteering and supporting others. So putting those things in place. Yesterday, I spent 2.5 days on my Sunday while Mel was watching whatever she was watching on soaps, catching up. I was pretending to listen, but headphones in, and I was coaching last night a head teacher, a deputy, and assistant head who were dealing with a crisis, and 2 dealing with applications for jobs in a real positive situation. But just that support to put in for those, and I'm doing that as part of the Women Ed support for colleagues. That lifts me. So those 5 ways really of connect, learn, exercise, notice, and volunteer, and build those in. I forgot where we were going with that, but that's a brief explanation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that forms that I have to give my own course a little plug here. That's the 5-step wellbeing action plan that I've built my course around as well. And they're phenomenally powerful. There's so much research behind all of these things that support our wellbeing, and that also creates a language in school as well, where you can share these things across your colleagues as well. Well, there's another question here from Mrs. Noreen Khalid, which is her Twitter is @5Noreen. How could governors help look after the wellbeing of staff and children and other governor colleagues? So in terms of leadership, what's the governor's role? Yeah,
I saw that question on Twitter, and I was dying to itch and jump in, but Noreen knows what I think anyway, so I shall jump in and say what. Right, as a head teacher, I have a duty of care to my staff. Yeah. The governors have a duty of care to me as the head teacher. That's their job. They must look after me as a head teacher and provide support and challenge. That's part of it as well. So the governors here, I was loud and proud and shared that slide when I first met them virtually around how we were going to operate and involved in the process. And actually they needed, before I could take up the mantle here and do what I'm doing, to understand where I came from as a head teacher, what my vision-based values were that included this whole approach being underpinned by the mental health and well-being of colleagues. And then how we do that with students. There's nothing contentious in there. If we're looking after people so they can move forward, that's great. It's a shift. It is a mind shift that we've got to make around how we use data, how we use targets to be able to move forward. And you have to be able to share how that might happen. So credit to my governors where I am at the moment. We needed a fairly rapid set of actions for where we were. I was coming in to it. So the day before we came and started in school at the start of September, I requested an extraordinary governors meeting before we started, so I could explain how we were starting the school post-COVID, including the way we were going to operate, how we were going to operate around and building it around these things, and also to have a new policy around appraisal, which allowed us to flip the narrative from being numerical target driven to being developmentally driven, underpinned by those standards and targets. So there's pressure on me to make sure I deliver on that quite rightly so. That's the expectations, but the governor's there they employ me and pay me well to lead the ship and to lead the school and to move it forward. And it's for them to understand and challenge and support as we go forward and allow that to happen. So for me, they have a great role in helping steer me. If you like, I'm the captain of the ship, but they're the owners of the boat. They're the custodians of what we do within here. So it's actually, I've not changed our values-based vision. We've still got the same words, but now a joint understanding about how we're going to approach that has been the shift to really embed what we were doing already in terms of our philosophy of working. So for the governors to challenge, support me to keep moving things forward, absolutely. And the governing body where I am now, they've absolutely recognised that. I know sometimes head teachers find it very difficult to impress the importance of that with governing bodies.
Yeah, and head teachers I know feel almost a level of caution if they're struggling in any way. They often don't. Their first port of call is not the governors. They feel like they need to somehow shield what's happening from them.
Yeah. Well, I'm steering a course of this ship. If you remember, I physically pointed people. That's the direction we're going. I got them to stand up and point, and I got a compass out. And so, because a little exercise I do is that everybody stands up, and I ask them just to close their eyes and point north. So everyone closes their eyes and everyone points that direction. You always get someone points to the ceiling, wherever. And then they open your eyes, but keep your arms where they are, and they're all pointing different directions. I get a compass and say, it's there. Let's all just point there. Point with me, not make it parallel. Get them to do that. Right, put your hands down. Right, close your eyes, point north, and hey presto, everyone points north. We're all pointing north. That's the direction we're going. If we agree this is the way we're going to go, and we set out what those things are, then we've got to keep ourselves going there. And let's not get distracted from that. Stephen Tierney, head teacher and a CEO of a trust over in Blackpool, who retired earlier, I think late last year, in fact, from headship, who does some great leadership stuff now. He used to say around his table, if he doesn't score an 8 to 10 towards our direction, he doesn't get it to the table. So it could be a 10 out of 10 idea, but if it's taking us over there, it's not for us. It's got to be able to feed into what we're doing and actually channeling all our work that direction, and actually maybe doing less. In fact, the phrase I use quite a lot is let's do less better. Less, but let's do less better and aim what we do towards here as we go forwards. And actually the old Morecambe and Wise phrase of, I don't know if you've seen the one with Andrew Previn, when he's playing Eric Morecambe's playing I'm playing to the older audience here while I'm talking, playing the piano, and it's all wrong. It's not this Greg's concerto he thinks it should be. And Andrew Previn comes, so you're playing all the wrong notes. And it's playing all the right notes, just not necessarily in the right order. And in fact, that's applied to so much of what we're doing here. Is we've done some leadership development work, we've done some teaching work, but actually not as part of a systematic frame. I've got on my wall in front of me here the framework we're using, which is a spine of work that we do where everything is underpinned on there or pinned onto there. It points it forward. It focuses on our priorities as a school. So all those courses, all those things, we'll look at how we're addressing the high, the HAP boys, and in fact those pupil premium boys or whatever group that the school is looking at, and we all jump together in the same direction and we start to have an impact. So by doing those things and keeping us focused, and really the governors, once we've painted that picture, bringing it back to the governors, and I've painted that simple picture and they know that's there, they hold me to account and make sure that's what's happening. And if I start to go off a bit, they'll say, but you said that's the direction. They keep me on that course. And that we're doing it to each other at the moment, and that's how it should be anyway, I think. But that's really where it needs to be. But I would say to any head teacher who's struggling to engage the governing body in terms of mental health and well-being or leadership around those things, it's make sure we understand the why, and we're all going in the same direction still. And to be honest, if the head teacher's not in the same direction as the governing body, it's the head teacher that's the temporary custodian. The head teacher that should decide not to be there if the governors are really set on where they're going. If there's a different, I'm assuming that we're not talking about a toxic situation where it's there are things that are happening that shouldn't be happening in a governing body, because again that can occasionally happen. But if the direction is not the direction, and there's a difference, that will lead to conflict. But just pick up on the point you said there about sometimes head teachers, they don't want to share because there are issues. Well, actually, we should share those issues. We should be able to do those. If we had a child in class who, when they made a mistake, hid it away and didn't show, and we didn't address it, that child would never improve. Well, as colleagues, if we're not used to, if there's not the trust to be able to have those open conversations, if there's a lack of trust, there's a fear of conflict, then there isn't accountability, there isn't buy-in, and we don't have that attention to details. That's the Patrick Lencioni dysfunctions of the team.
Yeah. Patrick, I could talk with you all day. There is just so much wisdom you're sharing with our listeners today. Thank you. I want to just ask one final question about your comment about being a well-being supermodel.
Yes.
Could you tell me what does that mean for you? What do you do? And
okay. I'll do this quite quickly if I can. Then, as leaders, if we are saying to the children, you've got to walk on the left, then I'll walk on the left. If we're saying that we're all wearing masks, I'll wear a mask. It's about being consistent and insistent and persistent around those things, around the things we do. Well, if I'm saying that I want people to take their own mental health and well-being seriously and put themselves first before helping others, I need to model that. And again, if people see me on Twitter, you'll see me post pictures of the food I cook each evening. You'll see Hurricane, my tortoise running a garden, headbutting a football. You'll see my holidays and the things I do with my family, and I share those things quite publicly, tongue-in-cheek, as a well-being supermodel. And I think leaders should be supermodels of the behaviours they want to see. So again, even though it sounds very tongue-in-cheek and a little naff, it does draw attention to the fact that all leaders should model the behaviours they want to see. So I just do what I do that makes me happy. It also, by doing that, and my daily tweet for Teacher 5 a Day, make sure that I am prioritising me. And if I don't have time to have put that tweet out, it means I've not had time to do something for me that makes me happy around exercise or
connecting any of us,
any of the five. So it's my daily reckoning. So it's quite selfish in terms of it's just making sure my daily checklist. Yes, I've done. Yes, I've done it. I've done, and I find myself looking forward to those. And the other thing as well is I sometimes find it really hard to squeeze work into my life because I'm doing it, and actually quite often I speak to leaders and they're really struggling to fit life into work, and work's a part of my life. So the work-life thing's a bit of a misnomer, really, but whenever a leader's telling me I haven't got time to, or I can't, well, let's have a look and see what we can do. And I've not found anyone I've spoken to where they've not been able to make some adjustments, some changes to improve their balance.
I would like to invite you to come back and do a whole podcast about that, because it's like an epidemic where people are working such long hours, and so just their own well-being is suffering as a result of that. So I'd really like to get some ideas from you about how to pick.
Got some lovely case studies of people that have turned leaders, teachers, support staff, but leaders of schools as well, that have turned around their own personal lives and the fortunes of their schools just by making those adjustments in their own life.
Yeah, critical.
Powerful.
Patrick, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure. So I've been speaking with Patrick Ottley-O'Connor. You can connect with Patrick on Twitter at Ottley-O'Connor. And it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Thanks so much for watching. Check out our website, pursuitwellbeing.com, for information about our 5-step wellbeing action plan for teachers and school leaders. There's a link in the description below. Or take our free teacher anxiety quiz at teacheranxietyquiz.com. The quiz only takes a couple of minutes and you'll get a better understanding of where you are today, plus tips to immediately feel better. I'd love you to connect with me on Twitter at Maria Brosnan. And if you enjoyed the show, please hit the subscribe button. If you feel inspired, give us a thumbs up, comment, and share it with your friends.